Good afternoon. Welcome to today's edition of the Coal Scene. Joining me in the studio this afternoon is our State's Attorney General, Patrick Morrissey. The State's Attorney General's office has been very ambitious in litigating a number of issues on behalf of the state of West Virginia. But certainly there's been some that have been perhaps most significant. Where the general and his team of litigators and lawyers have filed suit against the United States Environmental Protection Agency because of some of the onerous rules that have been initiated or proposed against our state's extractive industries. General, it's so nice for you to be with us here this afternoon. I'm glad you've taken time from your busy schedule to come and just share with our viewing audience, some of the litigation you're involved with on behalf of the state, particularly those issues involving EPA.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. It's a pleasure to be with you today and talk about the importance of the EPA litigation, because while many people don't realize it, all these illegal regulations that are coming out of Washington have really had a very negative effect on our economy and our job production in the state. And so I've put in place a team of people that review every line of every paragraph of every page of every regulation that comes out of Washington to look to see whether they're lawful or not. And if they're unlawful and they have a negative effect on the state of West Virginia, then we certainly don't hesitate to file suit.
Well, I tell you, it seems like there's such a void that was there over the years before you came in office,
Right.
The rules that we're seeing that you are involved with from a litigation standpoint, many have such a detrimental effect on various industries and businesses within the state.
Yeah.
And overall, it just really hits right at the core of our economy.
You know, it does, Chris, and I think as many people know, when President Obama came into office, he promised that he was going to bankrupt coal companies and put miners out of work. And the problem is that he's been living up to his promise. The good news is that because Congress is really unable to block a lot of these, given the need for over 60 votes in the U.S. Senate, sometimes the courts are the last refuge to be able to stop these illegal regulations. Among the state attorneys general, we sometimes say that state attorneys general are the last line of defense against a lawless executive, and that's what we've had here. So one of the things we've tried to do is focus on the regulations that have the most detrimental impact to the state. So for instance, the President's Clean Power Plan. A lot of people in West Virginia know about that because there's been so much job loss that we've seen, and that's in part due to the President's Power Plan. Loss of jobs, thousands upon thousands of coal miner jobs, price of electricity. We know that these regulations can impose a significant burden on consumers because when these regulations go into effect, a lot of the costs ultimately come out the other end, and consumers might see 15, 20, 25% spikes in their electricity bills. For a state like West Virginia that's trying to compete by emphasizing its energy resources, that's not good for the economy, because this is one area where West Virginia really does compete very well, but it's suffered in recent years. And then we also fight because of the reliability of the power grid. We want to make sure that there's a safe, affordable product out there that people can rely on when the temperature spikes over 100 degrees or when it gets down very low. All of that came into play with the President's Power Plan, and that's why we filed suit. And we were very aggressive. And as you know, Chris, we were able to obtain the historic stay of the President's Power Plan this past February. It was actually the last major decision that Justice Scalia made before he passed away.
Was significant. And I tell you, people all over the country were complimentary for you personally for taking the lead, and for the state of West Virginia for being right in the middle of the litigation for forging forward with the coalition. Talk about the coalition for
Sure.
a moment, because I tell you, it was just so significant, and I'm sure helped to better posture our litigation due to the fact that you were successful in putting together a national coalition.
Well, Chris, you're right. I think that you always succeed. Your likelihood of success is better when you go in as a team. And so early on, I believe it was after June of 2014, we started this process by writing a letter. And I think this was solely my office. We wrote the letter in 2014. And then a couple months later, we joined with an amicus. I think we had about 9 states as part of that coalition. A lot of the coal-producing states that were deeply concerned about the impact of the regulations on their states. But then we kept trying to build. And my goal was really to build a large, bipartisan coalition that really stretched across the ideological spectrum. So you start with 1, you go to 8 or 9, and we got up to about 15 states as we were starting to file suit. But then we went further. Chris, we reached out. Obviously, we talked to a lot of the coal operators and the National Mining Association. They joined our suit. We reached out to the Chamber of Commerce, but we also reached out to the miners. We partnered with the United Mine Workers Association, the electrical workers, and other labor unions, because this is not an issue that cuts across traditional ideological lines. If you're a worker, you care about this regulation because it can in part put you out of work. So we built that up. We had consumer groups, we had utilities, operators, businesses, labor unions, and at the end of the day, Chris, we had 29 states and state agencies in a bipartisan manner that got behind this effort. So when you get up to the Supreme Court with that kind of firepower, at a minimum, they pay a little bit more attention than perhaps they would if West Virginia was the only one to file suit.
Well, this rule is so substantial. There's been a number of economic profiles or models that's been completed. The mine workers, I recall, estimated that there would be 75,000 mining and mine-related jobs lost by this rule if it took effect by 2020, which all of a sudden is only a couple years away. And then that number doubles in another decade. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they place the value to our economy at billions of dollars, as the mining industry has as well. So it has a far-reaching effect because, as you say, it potentially raises everybody's energy bills, everybody's household and industrial fuel costs. And it drives our, and it places a lot of strain on the existing delivery of electricity.
Well, it certainly does, and that's the reason why the West Virginia Attorney General's office, my office, is so intimately involved in this, because this impacts real people. So I know a lot of times when people see some of the layoffs, the WARN notices, maybe a couple hundred people are losing their jobs, what folks have to realize is that in addition to those jobs that may be put at risk, there could be 7 to 10 other jobs that are negatively impacted every time a coal miner loses his or her job. That's not acceptable for me, because one of the roles of the state attorney general is to protect jobs from an overreaching federal executive. That's what we've done. And I want to make sure that when we're involved in this process, I get down to the southern coal fields. I go up to north central West Virginia. I meet with the miners, and I want to look them in the eye and say, I've done everything humanly possible to protect your job. I know that when we beat the president, the unprecedented stay at the Supreme Court, I know that wouldn't bring all the jobs back right away. But that one measure alone probably helped protect thousands of jobs. At least you can look someone in the eye and say, I'm doing everything I can to fight for you, because far too often people use rhetoric. They say they're with you, but they're not. We put our money where our mouth is, and we really go after it very hard. And sometimes you don't win the first time or two. That happened. We went in very early, but we kept going because we knew we were right, and we knew if we got to the U.S. Supreme Court, we'd win, because they saw the damage that was being imposed in West Virginia. They saw the strength of our legal arguments and reacted very favorably to it.
What kind of schedule is the court on with this issue?
Well, right now we're scheduled to appear before the full panel in Washington, D.C., the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, on September 27th. And what's interesting, Chris, is that this is unprecedented. We've bypassed the shorter panel, and now we're going to have about 9 people hear our case, 9 judges in September. And so this is important because I think they recognize the unprecedented nature of the EPA action. They all want to get in together. And ultimately, this is a case that's likely to go up before the U.S. Supreme Court, so they probably want to shorten the time frame it takes to get there. But we're getting ready for our oral arguments now on September 27th, and we're going to make sure that we represent West Virginia effectively.
Well, that's super. Now, that's only 2 months away.
You know, you have to put a lot of time in,
Yes.
right, with these briefs. I know with our Supreme Court filings, we filed it literally a couple days after we had not prevailed at the DC level, and then the reply came in from the other side, and then we were all putting in all-nighters trying to get the brief in the next day, and my team did a great job in getting that together. So there's a lot of work involved, but at the end of the day, it matters for real people. Because once again, if that win in February against the Clean Power Plan, if it resulted in, let's say, 2,000 or 3,000 jobs that we've protected, wow, isn't that a great thing for the state? And we want to keep going. If we can ultimately beat this thing back, I think it's going to result in even more jobs that could come back. Will things come back to the previous highest levels? Probably not. But what if they could come back 40 or 50%? Wouldn't everyone say that would mean a lot? Because that means you put more people back to work. And that should be all of our goals.
Well, there's a number of issues converging at the same time, but rest assured the environmental regulation and the assault by this president, his administration on the state of West Virginia's extractive industries has been at the core of those issues and probably has had a more of an impact than the weather conditions, the bad economy, the encroachment of natural gas into some traditional coal-fired electric generating facilities. But all that said, we are in a period of survival. We've passed austerity about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. We're now in a survival mode. But all indications, as you correctly point out, is that this industry will rebound some. Probably not to where we were a decade ago. But when you think about an industry, a mining industry producing 100 million tons of coal, and accounting for 20,000, 30,000 jobs, that is significant.
Absolutely.
So the mining industry, coal's going to be used, be used domestically, going to be used around the world. In fact, just a couple years ago, it was the fastest growing base fuel for electricity generation worldwide.
That's right.
And that growth is still, on an upward plane. But we'll rebound, and coal's going to continue to be used, and so once we get past the current law period, it'll be viewed as a substantial part of the state's economy.
I think that's right, and one of the reasons why we're so aggressive in fighting against the regulations is that even if coal, at one point it was over 50% of the nation's energy needs, and that number has declined a lot in recent years. But let's say hypothetically it lands at 33% or 35%.
And I think that's about where the National Energy Information Office places it going forward.
So if it rises just even a few percentage points from where we are right now, and we could put another 10,000 people back to work, well, I think all the 10,000 people who are going to work and then all the related jobs that arise as a result would be very pleased. And I'm a person who looks at this holistically. Yes, the cause of the decline is multifaceted. Certainly the pricing of oil and natural gas and weather conditions and worldwide market conditions have a real impact. But there's one thing that is very much in our control, and that's the regulatory apparatus that's coming out of Washington. And that's one of the reasons why, if we simply were to withdraw a number of those regulations, it's important for people to keep in mind these regulations are being put in place and they're iterative, sometimes like doubling up the regulations. This is not really about clean air or clean water. This is about an ideological agenda. But the other critical point, Chris, and the reason why we're involved in the AG's office is that what they're doing is unlawful. They're trying to engage in a power grab because the management of states' energy portfolios has always been done by the states.
Right.
Whether it's your mix is coal, oil, natural gas, wind, solar, water. Typically, a state, and this is as applied under the Constitution and the statutes, controls the police power, has the ability to manage in these areas. What the EPA is trying to do here is a power grab of historic proportions. Today, they can dial down coal through these regulations. Tomorrow, it may be oil and natural gas. It depends upon the preferred energy form in the future. I think we have to stop that because that's a debate that's best left to Congress, not to the courts. That's why we're involved, to make sure that we're stopping some of these illegal regulations from taking root.
You know, it's interesting, and to underscore the point about this whole plan being perhaps so subjective. When it was first being discussed 6-7 years ago, first couple years of this president's administration, oil and gas was in the same category as coal. It was an anti-fossil fuel.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden, we started to develop these newfounded shale gas formations, and they had to switch their policy to accommodate the growth within the natural gas industry that they couldn't control or stop. And so all of a sudden they somewhat embraced natural gas.
Right.
But a lot of people felt that was just a temporary
or out
of convenience.
And you're beginning to see that there actually is now real pushback from the other side to try to restrict oil and natural gas use in our country. And obviously we're a state that relies both on coal and oil and natural gas. And that's actually, when I look at the portfolio of issues facing our state, one of the reasons why I think West Virginia could be poised for a comeback is we're able to take advantage of our natural God-given energy resources, coal, oil, and natural gas. That could give us a competitive advantage that few states can match.
Yes.
So I'm optimistic for the long term, but look, there are some very difficult times ahead, and who's in power in Washington does matter. And that's why I'm hopeful that we could withdraw the regs rather than to have to go up to the Supreme Court, because while we have very compelling legal arguments, we don't know who the ninth justice is going to be.
That's right.
And so it's difficult to predict, and I'd much rather have certainty for the people of our state rather than to put it all in the hands of the ninth justice.
Well, you're really to be complimented because the legal aspect of defending against some of these rules and all was sadly missing for years. We always identify a three-prong approach to these kinds of issues. You have your congressional activity and your lobbying, and you also have the regulatory angle or arena where often you can defeat or have greater input, and then you have your legal dimension, if all else fails. And we've just never had that before on the state level.
Well, I think it was critical for the state of West Virginia. In fact, one of the reasons why I ran for Attorney General is I saw that the state of West Virginia wasn't doing enough. Occasionally you'd have a governor cherry pick to go involved in a particular case, and I would applaud them when they would do that. But you didn't have the concentrated effort trying to protect West Virginia jobs.
Right.
We have a federal government that is overreaching and really breaking down the 10th Amendment. The power that's not specifically delegated to the federal government has been reserved for the states. And I think sometimes people forget that. That's why we lead the way in a lot of litigation, because we want to make sure we protect West Virginia interests and West Virginia's sovereignty. And it's a critical component for any advocacy effort that you look at the legality of the regulations that are coming through. Chris, that's especially important when you have a president that is actually going to go around Congress.
Yes.
That's exactly what happened here, because you can't utilize all the tools to simply stop them in Congress, because you have an executive that's acting without authority to drive his agenda forward. So in some respects, that leaves the courts as the only vehicle to redress wrongs. And, but that's why we've stepped up, and I've made this a top priority in my office. Fighting federal overreach is critical. Protecting West Virginians from the ravages of substance abuse, and going after fraud, waste, and abuse. I think if we just keep doing those things right, and I think we are, then we could help our state reach new levels of prosperity in the future.
I want to come back and talk a little bit in a moment about what you're doing with the drug epidemic we have here within the state. I also know you've been involved with some Second Amendment legal issues. But parallel with with the power plan of the presidents, we've also had, some Mercury Mac issue.
We have Mercury, we have the new
Plus the
source
water.
performance standards, the Waters United
Water
States.
United States
You,
issue.
you know, Chris, this is an all-out assault on West Virginia, and we've been very active on a number of fronts. So the signature victory, the one that I think got a lot of national attention, was our efforts and our win against the president, his
Yes.
single top domestic
Right.
initiative. Isn't it great? Little old West Virginia got to lead the way and defeat the president's top initiative. But there were more.
And make no mistake about it, it is and was his top initiative.
absolutely.
I mean, it's the marquee of his administration.
Well, look, and I every day I have some of the liberals go after me. Why? Because they know that we've been effective at what
Yes.
we've done. But we don't let that bother us, because to me, this isn't a right or a left issue. This is about a lawful or unlawful issue. And so we're looking at these issues from the legal perspective. Now, beyond clean power, we were fortunate. We also helped put another broad coalition together, 30 states on a bipartisan level, to go after the president's unlawful Waters in the United States rule. And for those who are watching at home, this is actually pretty easy to understand. Back in the 1970s, Congress had provided the EPA power to regulate, quote, navigable waterways of the United States. And there were a number of revisions. This has been in place for a while.
Yeah.
Well, think about it. When you think of a navigable waterway, what do you think of? The Mississippi, the Ohio, the
Or
Potomac
traffic.
River, right?
Transportation.
Transportation. A
Yeah,
boat might be
yeah.
able to go through it. Well, over the years, that definition has really been modified significantly, to the point in the recent rulemaking, they put out something that would have regulated an ephemeral stream or a backyard ditch. Now, that's not a navigable waterway of the United States. And it would take a lot of the jurisdiction that's currently managed, regulated by the state and local concerns, and shift it up to the feds, creating penalty structures of up to $37,500 a day
Wow.
for noncompliance. So this was a power grab. And so
Once again.
yeah, so that's why we stepped in and we did a lot of the early work, the filing of the comments, seeding the record, and then developing the complaint, building a large coalition, because it's in the interest of West Virginians. If you're a farmer, if you're a landowner, if you're a property owner, if you're a retail establishment, if you're in the energy arena, if you care about a public works project, you should care about this Waters United States rule. But more fundamentally, if you care about state sovereignty,
Yes.
why do we have to have everything regulated by these distant bureaucrats in Washington? I think the citizens of West Virginia elect their own leaders to be responsive to them. And if you're closer to home, I think you're more likely to do a better job. So we obtained a big stay of the Waters United States rule. We obtained a big win in a big property rights case to
Right.
give citizens the ability to challenge some of the bureaucratic decisions right away. And we're going to keep going. We have some lawsuits we're getting ready to file in the upcoming weeks and months ahead. But let's be clear, we jump in when we think there's lawless activity, not just because I disagree, because
Right.
I'm not the governor or the legislature, I'm the chief legal officer of the state, and I would note our batting average is very, very good. We don't always win the first time we go in, but as you saw through the power plan and saw through the Waters rule, once we got up on appeal to some of these other courts, we were able to bring home some big victories for West Virginia.
You know, I think, talk to us a little bit just about what you're doing with the drug abuse
Sure.
issue, because I tell you, there's not a family, there's not a town, there's not a person in this state that's not
Right.
concerned about what's believed to be a real epidemic
Sure.
out there. And every family's impacted by it, every city's
Absolutely.
impacted by it. And I know you're doing some things out there to try to do what you can do to combat this issue.
Well, we've really worked hard to create a substance abuse fighting function in the Office of Attorney General. You know, if you go back in time to when my predecessor was in place, there really wasn't a comprehensive function within the office. Sure, you'd hear about a lawsuit here and there, and that's fine. And we certainly do the same. We enforce our consumer protection laws vigorously. But I thought that an attorney general could do a lot more. So we tried to go after substance abuse holistically, from a supply, a demand, and an educational perspective. What does that mean specifically? Well, it means that we not only enforce the civil consumer protection laws, but we've now engaged in partnerships with a lot of people around the state. For instance, in the Northern District, we work with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we have 2 special federal prosecutors that prosecute drug dealers that push poison around to our citizens.
Wow.
We've been able to get 4 convictions already through that partnership. That's a big plus.
Yes.
In addition, we actually work to educate people across the board. We've done over 150 different educational seminars. We're going out in the schools. We're actually now going out to work with high school athletes because we found that once they get on prescription pills, they may be more likely to be subject to abuse. So education's critical. But then we've just developed this new best practices initiative. That's a way to ensure that consumers, prescribers, pharmacies, that they know that opioids shouldn't be the first line therapy. Chris, it's my goal to dramatically reduce opioid use in the state by over 25%. And I think we're well on our way because we have a partnership with the Board of Medicine, with the osteopaths, with the nurses.
Once again, it's a pretty broad coalition.
You know, we like building coalitions, right?
And you do it very effectively.
Well, you win as a team in West Virginia. You saw what happened in the flood when people came together. They were phenomenal. West Virginia is the envy of the country. You know why? Because everyone worked together to look out for their brothers and sisters. I think the same approach is true on substance abuse. Let's get everyone together. That's what we've done. Law enforcement, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, the enforcement boards, our office. And by focusing holistically on the issue and engaging everyone, we're making progress. And I think that the numbers you're going to see in terms of opiate usage, the pills flowing into the state, that's going to dramatically decline. And then on the flip side, on the demand end, we actually engaged in a really interesting partnership with Ohio on faith-based substance abuse treatment.
Wow.
Because treatment has to be an important part of the solution as well.
Does.
And so Ohio had some really good programs in place with various pastors. So now we're replicating that in West Virginia. We had 275 people attend our first conference in Wood County. We have one coming up where we think there'll be a lot of folks up in Wheeling. We're going to go county by county. They're now creating a 1-800 substance abuse number for pastors. We're going to link up all the churches in the state. You know, isn't it neat what an AG's office can do if you put your mind to it? Substance abuse is a really important fight, and we've been doing it. And I think we can continue to make progress over the next few years.
I tell you, I think this show so far here has been just real interesting to learn about what all you're involved with and what your office is doing. And we're just about out of time here today, but we're going to have to get you back here real soon, maybe really delve into some of these other areas more extensively. I was at a function a couple recently when the senior senator from here in Kanawha was singing your praises, and he was thanking you on behalf of all West Virginians. And we're so quick to thank you on behalf of coal and the extractive industries, but I think that was so appropriate because of the span of issues you're involved with. We want to thank you so much on behalf of all West Virginians for the job you're doing.
Well, look, I really appreciate it, and we do our best every day to protect West Virginians, whether it's from the attacks coming out of the EPA, the ravages of substance abuse, or the scammers. We have a very good consumer protection division, I think a lot better than it ever existed in the past, and we're a lot more responsive. We turn around complaints on average within 35 days. Chris, that used to be over 100 days.
It's phenomenal.
You got to run the railroad the right way, and we certainly try.
We appreciate all you do. Thanks so much, and we'll be back here real soon.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us on today's edition of The Coal Scene. Thank you.